Hello, everyone. Welcome to Criminal Mischief, the Art and Science of Crime Fiction. I'm your host, DP Lyle. Got a great guest for you today, um, Adam Richardson. Adam, welcome to the show.
Thank you so much for having me.
Now, Adam is a retired detective, but we want to dig into his background a little bit and find out where he came from, how he ended up in law enforcement, and a little bit about that. So tell us about how you grew up and what led you into a life in law enforcement.
Oh, excellent question. I've known I wanted to be a cop since I was probably 3 years old. No one in my family was in law enforcement, and I just like the idea of being a professional good guy, being able to help people, always rooting for the underdog. Um, Honestly, I like the uniforms and all that kind of stuff, but looking back, and this kind of ties into what I do now, is it was 100% fiction that got me interested in this career. It was too
Hmm.
many episodes of Chips and Adam 12, and then later on Miami Vice, and then of course reading. Like I remember reading Silence of the Lambs. I was in high school at the time. Read it cover to cover before it became a movie, um, and just really, being fascinated by this career of being able to do this kind of stuff. And then, of course, that's like the little kid version of why I was interested. And then when I was in high school, a very close friend of mine, a girl that I went to school with, was sexually assaulted, and we were really close friends. And so that was kind of the point in my life as a young adult where I'm like, I'm going to take this seriously. And that really formed, um, not only, I mean, I already wanted to go into law enforcement, but it really kind of steeled my resolve, and it shaped the way I even socially, how I handled myself. So I didn't drink in high school because I knew I wanted to go into this career. And then that ultimately led to being given a badge and a gun when I was 21 years old. So looking
And,
back, a little bit scary.
yeah, and where were you when you became a police officer?
So I grew up in Northern California, and then I'd moved to Southern California to go to school and just never left. And I keep it vague intentionally. Uh,
Sure.
when you take on a kind of side job, if you will, you have to get approval from the agency that you
Sure.
work for, and part of that approval was not
Okay.
disclosing
I get
publicly
it.
where I worked. So, and
Not a
for
problem.
privacy reasons,
But somewhere in
but
California.
yeah,
Yeah.
exactly. So
Okay.
enough to keep me busy.
And I assume you started like on patrol and then moved your
Mhm.
way up to the detective
Yeah.
bureau. How long did that process take from?
So I was a back then there was a reserve program. So I started volunteering my time as a 21-year-old, and about 6 months in, they I got the opportunity to go to the police academy. And then at age 22, I started field training, came out of that, worked patrol, just like you said. And that was about 2.5 years. I got promoted very young to the rank of detective. I think I was 20, I was just shy of my 25th birthday, if I remember
Wow.
correctly. And when people ask what was it that led to such a young age for a promotion, if I could recommend any course to anyone in school, it would be number one, English. It's the writing. Um, when you work in the detective bureau, you kind of look at the officers that are writing reports as either detective quality or not detective quality. And so if you
Exactly.
want to go become a detective, everything we do is written down. So your writing skills are a must. And then the other course that fortunately I ended up with this course. I didn't ask to take it in high school, and that was typing. And between touch typing and English, I mean, that is
Wow.
the
Yeah.
best thing you can do to prepare yourself for a career as a detective.
And as a writer, absolutely.
Absolutely.
Absolutely. No question about it. Well, I've talked to a lot of people that have gone into detective work, and they said that what drew them to it was the ability to solve puzzles and put pieces together. Now, I'm assuming that you followed the same path, and that's what really,
Absolutely.
yeah.
Yeah. I mean, it's that's the draw to the fiction in the first place, you know, putting the
Exactly.
pieces together. I had a boss when I was in the detective bureau who said the thing that he loved as a kid was he remembered seeing a there was a crime that happened down the street. All he knew was there was this yellow crime scene tape up across the street, and this officer pulls up and gets out of his car and walks underneath that crime scene tape. And he thought at that moment, he knows what's going on. None of us know what's going on, but I really like the idea of knowing what's going on. And yeah, having that backstage pass to the greatest show on earth is a real thrill.
Yeah.
So yeah, it's hard to give that up.
Yeah, and the problem solving, a train leaves Cleveland going say 60 miles an hour. And yeah, yeah, where are they going to meet? Yeah, that kind of thing. And it becomes a math problem. So that's what's cool about it. Uh, People often don't understand exactly what a detective does other than gather information. But you guys would show up after the uniforms, the patrol officers, as it were, have arrived on the scene and hopefully protected it. And then when you approach a scene, say a homicide, what what's going through your head as you get out of your car? And you
Oh,
know very
it
little
is
except somebody's been shot. That's all you know,
right,
basically.
right. So you start running through a mental checklist. And really, what we're doing is project management. So you have crime scene investigators, you have medical examiner or coroner's folks. A coroner investigator, you're going to end up dealing with a forensic pathologist. You're going to have all of these different specialists doing all these different things that are there to help you. But really, as the detective, we're managing all of this stuff. So what is the autopsy going to tell us? What did the witness have to say? Any witnesses in the neighborhood? So we're really managing. We're the ringleader. We're managing that three-ring circus, and really just kind of triaging what it is that we need to accomplish. What tools do we have at our disposal, and in what order is that going to occur? Um, in When we talk about detective work, really what I'm doing, besides the writing that we talked about, which I cannot overstate how important that is, um, we are talking to people and we are trying to get to the truth of what happened. So, doing lots of interviews. Hopefully, we get to the point of interrogating a suspect. And every single thing we do, we are writing into a report. And a lot of times I don't have a doctorate in medical science of any kind, right? We rely upon experts to be able to provide that to us, whether that's a forensic pathologist or like using that Silence of the Lambs example. It may be a forensic anthropologist or something like that that's giving us these answers. But really, it's just kind of making sure that every uh, you know, I gets dotted, T gets crossed, and we come to a factual understanding of exactly what happened. And if that points to somebody who's guilty of that crime, then obviously we turn our case over to a prosecutor.
Right. And you work very closely with the prosecuting attorneys then, obviously.
Absolutely.
Do they step in early in some cases and kind of help guide the investigation to tell you what I need to know to bring this to trial, or does that come really much later? On TV you see them doing that. And I know some people said, yeah, we work with the prosecutors early, and other detectives say, we need to get all the information. And then we sit down and present the case to him and he says yay or nay. Is it somewhere in between?
It's really in between. It can depend upon the DA themselves, like the actual figurehead, as far as the head of the district attorney's office, as to how involved they want their deputy DAs to be involved. It could be personal preference on the part of the deputy DA. The issue that especially writers tend to not really think about, which can come up in a story as being a problem, is the more you have your deputy DA be involved in the investigation, they now put themselves in the position of, if I'm the deputy DA that did this thing that's really a detective's job, how do I get that testimony out on the stand? Because the detective's job is to come in and testify as to what they did, why they did it, who said this. All they're the ones presenting the evidence. They're under oath. The deputy DA's job is to be the one asking those questions. So if you're now in this position as the deputy DA who sat in on this interview and asked this question that resulted in a murder suspect giving a confession, it's like, well, I'm the one who has to testify to that, but it's my case. How do I testify in my own case? I can't take the stand in my own case. So you
Right.
can create conflicts. And I'll see that occasionally where the protagonist in a story is a prosecutor instead of a detective. I think some writers are a bit reluctant to write the detective characters because it feels like they don't know enough. And so that's what I try to help with anyway.
Yeah, yeah. Well, let's talk about that. So, you and I have that in common that we both consult with writers of screenwriters, novelists, whatever. My side on the medical and forensic science side, and you on the detective side. Now, you've been doing this for about a decade, right?
Mhm. Yeah.
Thereabouts. What led you to that? What made you think, this would be fun, other than that sign behind you that says teach everything you know, which I 100% agree with. Knowledge is
uh,
dead unless it's shared. So
yeah,
absolutely.
I wholeheartedly agree with that. What led to it, ironically, was wine tasting. Um,
Of course, why
so
wouldn't it?
exactly. So my wife is English, and we have some friends in Los Angeles that are also English. So it's like this Brit expat group. And they are screenwriters. They work in the entertainment industry. And so we did this kind of bunch of their friends got together, most of whom were in the entertainment industry, but we just did a wine tasting weekend amongst friends. And a few drinks in, one of the other people in this group, who's also a screenwriter, asked me a question about a script he was working on. And at the time, I was like, oh, yeah, that's easy. Blah, 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 blah. Here's the answer to that. And then the next day, after the buzz wore off, that's when I realized, you know what? I bet there are other writers out there that would be interested in getting their questions answered. And so it really just start with me in 2015, kind of finding writers' questions on Twitter and replying to that. And then that turned into a blog, and then it turned into a podcast, and now a course and all that kind of stuff. And really just kind of word of mouth of being able to help
Mhm.
here and there, and a lot of free help, helping with productions so that got wind of me and being able to help where I can. So a lot of times the consulting stuff was really just kind of one-off questions, and
Right.
then that's kind of my foot in the door. Where if they really like what I'm providing, then that will turn into a contract.
Yeah. Have you considered writing a book, putting some of your best questions in it?
Ooh, I have. That's actually been kind of the albatross around my neck for some time. I have started a book, and then got kind of sidetracked with a few other things and launching a school and that kind of thing. But I do have a draft 1.5 that I'm working on slowly. Now that
Okay.
I'm retired, that's in the cards for this year for sure.
Well, I turned my questions into three books, and one of them was nominated for an Edgar Award and all that kind of stuff. So
Amazing.
there's an appetite for it out there, I can tell you. Um, and I just picked like 170 of the best questions that I had and organized them, and this, that, and the poisons and guns and stuff. And then so I ended up with three different books out of that, and they've all been very, very good. And writers tell me all the time, "Oh yeah, yeah, I have those books, and they're so helpful." Because as you pointed out, it's not only that you answer the question, but the reader of those books see where the question came from because they can tell what the writer is asking, and then they read the answers, and then if they're writers, they're saying, "Oh, in my story," and that's really what you want. You know? Yeah, you
Absolutely.
give them something, whether if it's the answer they're looking for or not, doesn't matter. It's that it sparks another question, and then they will go find that. Um, of the question, do you get the same question repeatedly from a lot of different authors, and
Uh,
what might that be?
Definitely.
Yeah,
Oh, so a lot of times it is uh, procedural kind of things. Like how would I, you know, do this or do that? In what I try to do, and this is especially the case when I'm working with a like a TV show, is if you already have an end in mind, tell me that, and then we will
exactly.
reverse engineer the
Yes.
circumstances to make
Yeah.
it
What do
believable.
you want to happen? And sometimes the answer is, let's don't do that. Let's do this. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah. So like in the question of that I frequently, and I'm sure you do as well, is like how long does it take for X type of scientific result to come to me, right? So how long does it take for toxicology? How long does it take for DNA result? The answer is it depends. And really the answer is at what point do you need it to show up in your story? We can make it believable.
Yeah.
Everybody's overworked, but there's also the ability to make it happen quickly, especially scientifically. So
Yeah.
if you need it to be delayed, or if you need it to be, um, revealed early on, then we can make it happen.
Mhm.
We can make
Mhm.
it
Yeah.
believable.
Yeah.
I think the question I get the most, um, it's a telling question, but the question is, how long can the police hold someone? And when I'm asked that question, that tells me there's a fundamental problem with the way that your timeline is set up. Because the answer to the question is maximum 48 hours, more likely 24. But even if you're a fraction of that, even if you're at 12 hours, you're starting to get into trouble because it turns into habeas corpus issues of being able to say, we're charging this person with a crime or not. And the reason why I said that this is really showing me a problem with your timeline is as the detective working a case, when I'm interviewing my prime suspect and having it turn into an interrogation where I'm in his face in this little interview room and I'm trying to get him to admit to this murder or whatever the heinous crime is, when he finally shuts down, whether he said anything or not, I need to be ready to put him in handcuffs or completely let him go. He's either free to leave or we're putting him in jail regardless of whether or not he said anything because our case is that strong. So if you're asking how long can you hold somebody, that tells me that you're having this interview and interrogation occur way too early in the story. Doesn't mean you can't talk to the guy, but when you're getting to that point where you think you need to hold on to him, it means, you don't have enough to move forward, or you're just kind of not really understanding the sequence of events that we typically follow.
What's the oddest questions you've received of things that were just so far out? It's like, really? Like I get questions about zombies, and vampires. So time travel, you name it. It all comes into medical and forensic science.
Yeah. I can see, normally when I get these questions, I can see the through line to it. So I will get a lot of questions that are sci-fi stories, um, or fantasy stories, or like romantasy stories, things where it's like an alternate reality, but they're still grounding that story in some sort of believable law and order thing. So even if it's some space federation out in, light years away, there's still some sort of, like I'm a video game player, so I'm thinking of like Mass Effect video game where they have this Spectre character where it's like he's a cop essentially. So there's still a law and order element, so we can definitely play upon that to make it happen. The other one I will often get is about a cop character in a romance book. And I hate to break it to those writers, but cops do not find handcuffs sexy. We know exactly whose hands those handcuffs have been on. So we are not, we don't find the same thrill in that kind of stuff. Ugh, it's just gross.
Exactly. Yeah. That's, yeah. That doesn't work so well. No. Um, well, cool. I know that when you do consulting, obviously it's more than just answering the question. I mean, the
Mhm.
question is straightforward. If this, then that. Okay, fine. But do you work with the writer that is asking you the question to say, why don't we consider this plot line? Why don't we consider this story element? Why don't we consider moving in that direction and kind of educate them into how this story might go in a different direction, or at least offer them those things? Do you do a lot of that too?
It really depends upon at what point I was brought into the story process.
Right,
A lot of times I'm dealing with an entire writer's room. They've already broken out the story
right,
for the season and they already have these beats and these
right,
episode things. And
exactly.
so now
And
it's
they want
they've
to
painted
point
them
information. Yeah, at this
exactly.
point in time with this information, yeah, yeah,
Yeah. And so I've been able to and I really enjoy this part of the work because it gives me constraints rather than just saying, why don't you do it this way? It is okay, we need our detective to learn or have this occur, but you know, this story is set in a different era where we don't have modern cell phones or whatever it is, or we have you know, these other A story, B story, and C story doing all of these different things. We need this to happen within a certain part of the episode. So just getting really creative and reverse engineering the problem where I'm cognizant of the fact that I can't usually um, add too much as far as
right,
lengthening an episode. Um,
exactly.
and I'm also like, if I say, you know, oh, that wouldn't happen at the police station, that would happen to this other location. If I make that recommendation and they're already in the process of building their sets, it's just like I'm now
Yeah,
creating a new
exactly.
set, you know, so you don't really know what the ramifications are sometimes until you start doing this work where you're like, okay, there are some limitations on the recommendations I can give.
Exactly.
Or
Exactly.
if you've only been read in up to a certain number of episodes, you may not know that you know, your suggestions are completely changing the last several episodes
Yeah,
that are
because you
still
don't
being
know.
written.
They're not going to tell you what's coming. They
Yeah.
jealously guard their story, and rightly so. I
Yeah.
understand.
Yeah.
And they're slaves to page count and time. So you got to be cognizant of that when you're doing that. Well, tell us a little bit about this.
The Writers Detective Bureau. Yeah. So that was the name I came up with that years ago. And really, it was Writers Detective, being, you know, the detective that writers can talk to. And
Right.
then the Bureau is what my group, the people that listen to the podcast and that are in my school, kind of collectively what we call ourselves. Most police departments have a detective bureau, so that's where the term comes from.
Exactly.
Yeah, so it's just my best effort to try to help writers as best I can.
Cool. Now that's like people subscribe to to this service and join your bureau as it were. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. So it's on school.com, writers detective. So school.com/writers
Yeah,
detective.
that's
It's,
SKOOL for people. Yeah.
yeah, thank you. Yeah. And so it's online, like small online classes. I've got one on there for crime fiction guns. A lot of my writers do not have American style access to firearms or are, you know, too intimidated to walk into a gun store to ask what they might perceive as a stupid question. There are no
Right.
stupid questions, but you know, if you're
Exactly.
going to walk into a gun store to ask a writer question, you've never handled the gun before, that can be quite intimidating. Or you're in the UK or Australia or somewhere where you don't have that opportunity. You know, just one of the many things in there is the in A to Z. If you've never held a gun before, what do all the numbers mean when we talk about ammunition or guns themselves? What's the difference between a submachine gun and a revolver? All those kind of things are covered. And there's co-working sessions. So I literally just came from one before this call where we're each, you know, all in there together doing our lonely job of writing with our screens on and our mics off. And then I do several Q&A sessions every week. So if you've got a burning question, there's always an hour, a couple hours per week where you can just get on essentially the equivalent of a Zoom call and be able to ask your question and then share a screen if we need to do some research and dive into your specific question for your specific story.
Cool. Cool. Well, if people wanted to find out more about you, and maybe ask you a question or engage with you on where would they find you?
Either writersdetective.com, which is the main website, or at school.com, SKOOL.com/ writers detective.
Perfect. Perfect. Well, this has been fascinating, and I'm glad our paths crossed because we have so much in common, and I really appreciate you sharing your knowledge and what you do, and a little bit about you with my viewers and listeners. And I want to get you back sometime, and we'll talk about some more stuff and get into some details of stuff maybe.
I would love that. That'd be a lot of
Yeah,
fun. Thanks so much
even
for
though
having
you're
me.
on the other side of the world in Spain, but that's I'm jealous.
Living the retirement lifestyle. Yeah.
Exactly, exactly. All right. Well, thank you, thank you, thank you. All right, everybody. This has been the Outliers, uh, Criminal Mischief, the Art and Science of Crime Fiction with DP Lyle. And we'll be back with other guests and other shows and other information and a lot of fun. And until then, keep reading, keep writing, keep having fun. And as I always say, try not to get caught.